Welcome to the newest episode of A Better Conversation, a podcast put on by A Better Dallas. As always, I am your host, Chris Clement, joined tonight exclusively by the man, the myth, the legend, the mustache, Mr. Kyle Mason.
Not quite a special guest, but I like to still call myself special in my own way. Guys, if you're listening to this, please like, subscribe, and most importantly, share this podcast.
I'm going to say more important than that, in the comments, let us know how special you think that Kyle is. Be descriptive. I think he's a special guy, but we want to hear from you. We also want to hear topics that you want to hear about on the podcast. The reason that we do this is to better help inform you, our audience. If there's a topic that you want to know about, if there's something that you're curious about that you've seen, put it in the comments. Let us know. Follow us at Better Dallas on social media, on Facebook, on Instagram. Slide into our DMs. Let us know what you want to hear about because, again, we put this on for you. So tonight we're going to be focusing on a few different things. One is we're going to be focusing on the end of the Texas legislative session because it is fast approaching its conclusion. The day that we publish this will be the last day for things to come out of committee. Really important times. Mm-hmm. And we'll talk about that more in detail. And then also, we're going to talk about some national issues. We're going to talk about the Biden cancer and Biden cover-up, the Dems starting to actually take ownership of the fact that they did that, kind of. And then we're also going to talk a little bit about the Epstein issue, deep state type of things, stuff that might cause us to get into car accidents in the future, but we're going to dive into it. As always, we have our unofficial sponsor, Monster Energy, powering the podcast tonight at the end of busy work days for both of us. But Kyle, let's get started. Legislative session.
Yes.
127 days in, 12 days to go. What are some of the things that you're really looking at between now and June 2nd?
Yeah, good question. And the reason that I actually asked you this question, because I've been asked this question of, hey, they've been down in Austin since January
4th, I think.
Okay. So like, let's say early January, mid-January, 14th. And a lot of things really haven't been, as far as the public can see, passed. And there's thousands of bills at this point that have been brought forward. And of course, me and you know, and probably the audience, that like a lot of those are just whatever, people just publish bills, right? You can get a number on your bill, but most of them aren't really going anywhere. So now we're down to the wire of this legislative session. And it's like, okay, how many things have really been passed? Have we really moved the needle? So like people ask me like, hey, so like what's the deal with like teachers' raises, and what's the deal with this bill, and what's the deal with the water bill, and what's the deal with all these things? Because really it's just headlines, nothing substantial. And of course we had school choice, which was like, that's really why nothing else has been moved, because like that was going to be the first thing. Do you think that we're going to go into a special session to get a couple more things done this year?
I wouldn't be if they don't get property taxes addressed. And I think honestly, if they don't get teacher pay addressed, I wouldn't be surprised if the governor called a special session to do those sort of things. Mm-hmm. There's been a lot that's been passed. The question is like how much of it's big, how much of it matters to your day-to-day life, because the legislature will pass bills that sort of adjust minor types of things, but the bigger rock things are what's not being advanced. Mm-hmm. When you talk about stuff like property taxes, when you talk about stuff like teacher pay, there's a very big bill. It's House Joint Resolution 7, HJR 7. This is what, sometimes is called the water bill, or we've referred to as the water bill, because this is the bill that says that we're going to have a Texas constitutional amendment, or we'll have a vote on it, where it sets what required funding is for Texas water infrastructure. Something that a lot of people may not know is that, in Texas, we've got to pay the piper on our water infrastructure. We've got a massive growth in population. We also have water infrastructure. Think of pipes, treatment plants, all that sort of stuff, water supply. That's, 60, 70, 80 years old. And this is stuff that needs to be fixed on a state level, on a local level. We have dams that need to be done. We have all sorts of stuff that needs to be done. And so it's going to cost, the estimates that I've seen have been something like, over the next 30 years, I think it was like 150 some odd $billion
Yeah, that's probably low.
that need to be spent to completely get our water infrastructure up, because we not only have to fix the old stuff, but we have to increase our water supply for new people moving into the state. And so that's a huge thing. I mean, that's one of the reasons that was one of the governor's priorities.
Mm-hmm.
So right now, HJR 7 passed through the House, but it's sitting in committee in the Senate. And this is sort of the dangerous thing on that bill. It had a hearing on May the 7th. And since then, it's just been sitting in committee. It hasn't been passed out of committee. Now, I've been told by people that are in the know on it that they expect that it will get passed out of committee. It will go to the Senate floor for a vote. It'll ultimately make it to the governor's desk. But that's the stage that we're at right now in the legislative process. There's a bunch of things. You know, we talked about SB 30. SB 30 is currently just sitting in a House committee. And that was the bill we talked about in the last episode that would prevent there from being basically, you know, borderline scams in the plaintiff's attorney, medical damages, harm presented to the jury type of stuff, where they have their own doctors that are in their pockets that, you know, will charge these huge bills that are not realistic at all. They're not based in reality whatsoever. And it's meant only to be able to go to a jury and have somebody get up there and say, oh, yes, these medical bills are worth, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars, when in reality it's like 30 grand.
Yeah.
That's a bill that would be very, very helpful. It's just languishing in committee. That's the frustrating part. And I'll have to say, and Kyle, I would imagine you probably feel the same way. But if you track the legislation, if you track the legislative session, you fall in love with some bills.
Yeah.
There's some stuff that like you're excited to see and hope gets passed. And then it just ends up, it looks like it's on path. It looks like it's on path. And then it just sits in a committee forever and never sees the light of day.
Yeah, I think that's the problem. I mean, I don't know exactly how many bills there are, but the number gets up there in the thousands. And it's like, I get that, you know, they're politicians, like they need to put forward something that's like, hey, this is the bill that you know, and we see it a lot too in the headlines. If you've noticed, like if you're scrolling Instagram and it says like House passed this or Senate passed this, and the headline is really catchy, but really that doesn't mean that it's actually done. It means like it got through a committee, or it's like, okay, but now we need a matching, or it needs to go over to the Senate. And then it has to get, like, it doesn't mean that it passed the vote or whatever that may be, but it doesn't mean that's actually being instituted into, you know, into law. So I think a lot of it's very misleading, but like with the water thing, okay? People, I don't know if people realize the amount of undertaking it takes to make a lake or to have water. You know, our DFW would not be able to be the size it is if the legislator years ago did not do what they have done, which was buy up all this land from hundreds and thousands of individuals that own these plots of land, right? Individually with right away. Then Army Corps of Engineers has to go in and build the dam. Then they have to wait for it to fill up. Then they have to maintain it. And, you know, as the years go by, land is more and more divided up.
Right.
So it's even more tricky to buy land. You have lawsuits, you have, you know, owners' rights and things like this. So, and this is a situation where you have to have water, right? You have to have water to build neighborhoods and to have sewer systems. And, you know, it's like a couple really bad droughts, and we've had bad droughts here in DFW and in Texas. That's a serious situation. Yeah. And you have millions and millions of people that are like, you know, and we see it down in Austin, Lake Travis, maybe it is. One of the lakes, I always see photos of like it just down every year, where it's like the docks are just sitting on dry land. So it's a very important bill. And then I think also, you know, school choice got passed. Okay, great.
Right.
We'll see how that pans out in the future. I think that without a funding bill for teachers' pay, etc., I think that it could end up have really negative repercussions in the very, very near future if we don't do something with the surplus. I think paying teachers more, incentivizing the hiring of more teachers is going to be really important.
Hey, did you know a Better Conversations on social media? You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and X. Following us will not only keep you up to date on our latest podcast drops, but will also keep you informed on current events around DFW, including election news, volunteer opportunities, and social events like late cleanups on Saturday mornings or our happy hours throughout the month where you can meet like-minded people in a fun social setting. You can also meet local politicians and activists that are our guest speakers. Follow the links below to connect.
And I think that's why I listed that as one of them that I think the governor might call a special session for.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, if we don't do something to address property tax relief, and if we don't do something to address teacher pay, those are priorities for the governor. Actually, water was a priority for the governor as well. Like there's a lot of this stuff that Governor Abbott listed as his emergency items. And, this is where when it comes to the order that you address things in the legislature, we've all known forever that the legislative process is a lot of horse trading.
Yep.
It's a lot of I scratch your back, you scratch mine. I vote for your bill, you vote for mine. Like that's part of the process. It's sort of Pollyannish to think that everybody's down there just voting on the goodness of the bills that they read, largely because there's a lot of the bills that they don't really get an opportunity to read and study.
Right.
I mean, I find it, you talk about there's thousands and thousands and thousands of these bills. Even if you were able to read them all, let's say you are a dedicated representative and you read every single bill that's presented to you, that is woefully insufficient to be able to understand the bill enough.
Right.
To be able to cast an educated vote on it. So what inevitably happens is you build up your teams of people that you trust. And you have the certain legislatures that you've worked with in the past, and they're experts in this area. And if they support a bill, then you support the bill. And the problem that we have, I think, consistently with our legislative sessions, I think Governor Abbott did a good job of prioritizing issues that matter the most to Texans, or that will have the biggest impact on Texans. How much of it had to do with education, right? School choice was part of it, but it was also increased teacher pay and increased money for vocational training, all sorts of stuff like that were in the governor's bill or the governor's emergency items. But then when you hear the electeds that get down there and they start in on all of their political machinations, all of a sudden those matters that matter the most to Texans just go by the wayside.
Yeah, I definitely agree. We have the majority, and it becomes this serious issue of what can we get passed, what was overpromised. Of course, everyone's campaigning, and so you have to promise a certain amount of things. I don't know. The school choice thing was very big. I think as far as politics go, if you walk away with school choice, tax bill relief or property tax relief, and a pay raise for teachers, which I actually kind of thought was going to be in the school choice. I thought it was going to get attached, but it wasn't. But I think that would be I think that would be a fairly good session. It's tough though, because Texas right now has the backdrop. The Texas Legislature has the backdrop of what's going on nationally. And it seems right now nationally that the Trump administration is constantly every day kind of flooding the zone with positive news. And we're doing this, and we're doing this, and we're doing this. And it mostly is executive orders, which is obviously can be much easier than actual passing legislation. Unfortunately, we can't seem to get much passed in legislation, but they have this challenge right now where the last couple of years they've been their backdrop was Joe Biden, who couldn't get anything done, who was incompetent, who was this and that. We're about to touch on that, his health and everything. But now Trump is in there doing all this rah-rah, right? And all these things are getting done, and he had his world tour, and now he's got an extra, $2 trillion in investments and things like that. And compare that to the Republican Texas, House and Senate, it's like, well, hold on. I mean, it seems like we're not getting much done.
Right.
So it's a little bit more challenging, I think, as far as the pressure's on for them to actually perform. 14 days, it's going to be a very busy 14 days for them because, a lot
12.
of them, 12 days.
12.
So a lot of them are either, doing overnight drives because their children are graduating something, right? And then
Right.
they're shooting back to get done. And then, of course, we have Memorial Day coming up. So, of course, they'll probably take that off, I'm assuming. So it's like they don't really have 12. They have 12. They don't have really 12 business days. They just have 12 days in total. So I'm gonna put $20 on an extended session.
Well, so here's where we're at right now. So HB2 is the bill that has to do with increasing teacher pay or education funding.
Mm-hmm.
And it is currently vote taken in committee. So on the 19th. So I think it's probably on its way for a floor vote.
Okay. Yeah, I would suspect that's going to pass. I can't
Yeah.
imagine that not passing. I mean, maybe people vote in protest saying it's not enough. Maybe they have a little bit of flack for that, or like a little bit of cover for that. But also maybe not.
It was almost unanimous when it went through the Texas House. So the third vote on it in the Texas House was 142 yays, 5 nays, and 3 abstentions.
Okay.
So it was pretty well. I mean, yes, let's see. You have Briscoe Kane voted against it. You have the illustrious the no platform, no light is too bright for me. Brian Harrison voted against it.
Okay.
You had former guest David Lowe voted against it. You had Brent Money vote against it. Mike Alcott vote against it. So you had like your, I would say, far right budget hawk kind of guys voted against HB2. And they probably voted against it because it was too much money. If I had to guess.
Yeah.
Which I guess I shouldn't overly speculate. You could probably look up why they voted against HB2. But I mean, it passed fairly easily. So, it should get, I would assume it gets out of the Senate committee, get to a floor vote. That seems like one of those that should be able to get done by June 2nd. So that's good news.
Well, I kind of hope that it does. I mean, we had a conversation not too long ago about there's this backdrop of hey, look, when one election is over with, the next one starts immediately.
That's it.
So we do have this backdrop of, I mean, we have lived through a pretty miraculous, the most miraculous political comeback, not in our generation, but maybe in the last 100 years, right? Where we had a president who had a very turbulent exit, we'll say, and then his political opponents try to put him to prison for over 700 years. Okay. Fought all that, won all those, or they got dismissed, or however you want to put that. And it wasn't just about him, but it was about the party in general, right? And it was about the people who supported him and the thought process behind it and the ideology. And there was a lot that went into it, but essentially boot, rally. Now we're in the position of authority of, okay, we made a lot of promises. It's time to deliver on those promises, because if you start coming up short on these promises, and we're only 120 days in or something like that, but if you start coming up short on these promises, the matter of the fact is just that midterm, it's going to be a smoke show, and you're going to be left with a situation of, Trump very well, depending on who gets reelected, could end up going through the whole impeachment thing again, right? His powers could be very well pulled back. And then we have to also think about, okay, well, what about the Supreme Court? Last 2 years, maybe someone retires, maybe someone unfortunately passes away. You got district judges. You have all these little tertiary things. It's like, it's not just, Trump's not going to be at the top of the ticket. The Republican Party in general is going to have to show up with, hey, look what we've done. This is what we've done for you lately.
Right. And I think this goes back to what I was saying earlier. This is why when we go into a legislative session, the question we have to ask ourselves is, what issues matter most to voters? Like, what matters most to the overall constituents, not just this little pocket of our supporters, but what are the things that matter to everybody? It's like, as a politician that you've got to give handouts to your supporters.
Sure.
You've got to toss them a bone. Like, that's been the oldest political, piece of political knowledge. You've got to do that sort of thing. But you also have to take care of everybody that voted for you, because they're all your constituents. You have an ethical obligation as a representative to represent everybody. And you also, it's just smart politics. If you want to win general elections, then you need to deliver for as many people as you can that live in your district. And if you're president, that's the whole country. And so, you look at recent polling. What do Americans care about right now? They care about the economy, first and foremost, right? That's the biggest thing. And with a subset within that is obviously inflation. They care about energy prices. There are certain things that get a lot of attention that Americans aren't too worried about right now. They're not too worried about Israel and Gaza and that conflict. They're not all that worried about Ukraine and Russia and that conflict. That's not where their attention on. Their attention is on these tariffs. What's it going to do for us? Their focus is on, what's inflation going to do? These are the sort of things that as president, you can absolutely deliver on. One of the things that we'll talk about later, people are very, very focused on trust in government, because it works both ways, right? If you're a Republican, you have so much distrust for the government, especially the federal government, coming out of the Biden administration. On the flip side, if you're a Democrat, you deeply distrust Donald Trump and his administration. So you have a major issue that voters across the country are focused on is, what do we do? What do we do for trust? But then you also have immigration as a major issue. And that's another one of those things that the polling numbers will show, hey, it depends on what side of the aisle you're on, right? If you're a Republican, you're very concerned with immigration, but more on the limiting the flow of illegal immigration and deporting dangerous, immigrants back to their countries. If you're a liberal and you look at illegal immigration, you're worried about Trump violating people's due process rights and all that sort of stuff, which, look, it's legitimate. We need both. We need the opposition to hold the party in power accountable. It's a good thing to have. It's just, sometimes, the Democrats, you
very
look at
selective.
Well, it's not just that selective, but they pick the worst people to get behind.
Yes, they do. We were talking before we hit record. I said, I don't know how unlucky an individual could be, let alone a group of people, a party. The Democratic Party have almost exclusively picked the wrong side of every major argument. And I really do think this is linked to Trump derangement syndrome of Trump will look at something and kind of take a like common sense approach,
right?
And be like, I think that this virus was from China. I think China made this virus. No, they didn't. And then we saw that whole thing, and it's like, it turns out like, I don't think it's like they're bad at picking. I think that they are just whatever this guy says, they pick the opposite, and this guy happens to be right more times than not.
Well, I actually think they are. It's just like the guy in Maryland, right? The alleged innocent father in Maryland that the slightest bit of digging,
Yeah.
and you realize, oh, this isn't as good as I thought that it was. Right. And that's laziness on behalf of the media. That's laziness on behalf of whoever is pushing narratives
Yep.
within the Democrat Party, because you used to fully vet that stuff. It's just like, the Republic, George Santos, when he got elected. Yeah, nobody was really vetting it. They were just sort of letting it roll without really looking into it. And you end up with egg on your face when you do that often politically.
Yeah. He just needs to come to the table and say, hey, what I did was wrong, and give him my sentence and move on. But he's going to fight it kicking and screaming. So kind of to roll into the next thing about they keep picking the wrong topics, and how, it's a lot of it is really self-inflicted. Like, I think that right now the Democratic Party doesn't have a leader, and they don't have a, here are our top 3 issues, and this is just what we need to stick to. They really don't. Because they can't get over their past. And one thing that keeps coming back to bite them is Joe Biden, and how much they just prop this guy up.
Yeah.
Right. And now they did this really weird thing, and I think this was a coordinated release. Joe Biden goes on The View, and it's another stumble session of him trying to get through what he's saying, what he's talking about. Then they come out and they give this release of, unfortunately, Joe Biden has cancer, right? And it's really bad. It's to the stage where it's in his bones, it's metastasized. And look, I'm not a doctor, so I just have to kind of go off what other doctors are saying. And they're saying, hey, look, for it to get this bad, you're looking at a minimum of 5 years, but probably more likely 10 years because of the advancement in identifying and treating and kind of holding back this cancer. And that is unfathomable that a president of the United States who gets regular exams, who has access to any medicine or screening in the world, which normal people have this access to identify this cancer, right? That this went unknown.
Right.
And so, yet again, the Democratic Party has put on their shoulders of themselves this issue of, how are we going to square this circle of like, hey, we lied to you again about this man. Right? Don't believe your lying eyes. So it's like he was mentally incapable. He couldn't speak. He couldn't walk. He couldn't hear. He didn't know who he was talking to. He wandered off stage a couple times. Like, he fell off the stage. Also, insider story, we knew this man had such degree of cancer that more than likely, if he gets reelected, I mean, I would assume, and some people are saying, I'm not saying, some people are saying that he probably will die within the next couple of years. He's already he's actually way past average life expectancy for a male. Right. And now he has this issue. We've seen his decline. And so the Democratic Party was putting a man forward that could potentially have won the presidency. And I still, even with all this, I still think he was a better candidate than Kamala Harris. I still think he would have turned out more voters. Scranton Joe would have still turned out more voters than Kamala Harris. But that's a side note. They were willing to put a person up on the top of the ticket that they knew had the chance of dying in his office term. That right there is absolutely wild. And I have a couple of statements here. This is from X. I will be posting on social media. I did Google, hey, give me give me a list of statements all the time people said Biden's health was in good order. Google Chrome could not produce the list. It said there is an error. How do you have, okay, but anyways, that right there is like, tech censoring is still going on, but and a lot of these were from the White House physician, right? And if you remember, he's had some pretty odd physicians. He had the trans dude that was a woman who was like Navy.
That was the admiral of
yes.
something.
Yes. And then there was a secondary gentleman. I'm forgetting his name right now, but another military person. They knew. They knew this and they did not disclose this to the public. And I really do feel like that is I don't know. I mean, you're the lawyer. I don't know if that's like criminal. I don't know if the presidency has the right to HIPAA and privacy of that level. But when they come out and sign a statement saying that, oh, they're in good health and order, and they're really not, like if I go
it's
in,
called it is a crime. It's called falsifying a government record.
yeah, right.
Right. So if you're going to come out there and sign a statement that the president's, that if that's a government record, if you're signing off on something that the White House is keeping as part of its presidential health, whatever, like, yeah, that could be that could absolutely be falsifying a government record. Here's the most interesting crime related quote. So Van Jones, and so for those of you that don't know who Van Jones is, used to be in the Obama White House as a special advisor, has been on CNN and all these other shows, all these other networks for years. Very, dim talking head, Democrat talking head, not a Republican, not
cried when Trump got elected the first time.
Right. Van Jones said that what the Democrats did in hiding Biden's illness and his decline was a crime against the Republic.
That's big.
That's a big quote, and it's an accurate quote.
Mm.
And, we talk a lot about, or we've kind of been talking, here are the people that I think were the most harmed, and that's Democrats.
Yes, absolutely.
The Democrats and Democrat voters were the people that were most harmed by all this. And I go back to the 2020 primaries when Bernie Sanders was going to win that thing.
Yes.
Bernie Sanders was absolutely going to win the 2020 primary, and Obama came in and orchestrated a Biden win. He got the right endorsements in South Carolina. That was the first state that Biden won. You can't tell me he did not negotiate with Pete Buttigieg and the really angry lady that ate with the comb out of Minnesota,
Klobuchar, yep.
We cleared the road for them. Cleared the lane, so it was only Biden, and then let Elizabeth Warren split the vote with Bernie so that Biden could win that thing.
Mm-hmm.
And you knew during that election that there was something wrong with Biden. He was giving speeches confusing his wife and his sister. He was, unable to remember part of the Constitution or his Declaration of Independence. One of the two. I can't remember. I think it was part of the preamble.
The thing.
The thing. This guy was breaking down during that. And then, of course, we have the epic campaign from his basement against Trump.
Yeah.
In 2020, they all knew. But here's the thing, that Democrats have to be mad all the way back to 2016.
Mm-hmm.
Because Bernie would have won then. Bernie would have absolutely won in 2016.
Mm-hmm.
But not for this rally of super delegates in favor of Hillary Clinton.
Yep.
And so this is a sort of thing that, like, in psychology, they talk a lot about like projection. Oh, if your boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife is really concerned about you being unfaithful, they're projecting. Maybe they're the unfaithful one. Well, when the Democrats attacked Trump for destroying the Republic and being a threat to democracy, boy, that is absolutely projection for a lot of the Democrat elite who have not given a rip about democracy in 2016 so they could get Hillary, didn't give a rip about democracy in 2020 so they could hoist Biden up there.
I can't say it loud enough for my Democratic friends and family members and just anyone. It's like Bernie should have been on that ticket twice.
Right.
Right. And look, Trump came out saying a lot of the things that Bernie was saying.
Yeah.
But as soon as Trump started saying it, he switched his tune, especially about closed borders, et cetera, et cetera. But like, man, they just played him. And then here was the worst part, I think, just real quick on Bernie. He just went in. He's like, okay. He went up on stage. Remember everyone, he was sitting cross-hand. He had like the knitted gloves and stuff like that. And he just sat there pouting, went along with it twice. It's amazing that this apparatus, they have the super delegates. They have just tons of issues with their primary. And their voter base doesn't seem to want to address it as aggressively as, like, for instance, the Republican Party did with Trump.
Oh, I think their voter base absolutely wants to address it. The problem is that they can't.
They can't. They don't. Yeah, they haven't.
I mean, look at what happened with Kamala.
Yep.
So once they did kick out Biden,
yep,
the Democrats could have had, at the very least, a floor vote at the national convention to potentially pick the replacement. And the powers that be within the Democrat Party, nudge, nudge Obama, did not give them that ability at all.
Nope.
Just handpicked. It's going to be Kamala. We're going to have a special
Zoom meeting
to make sure that we seal that down, because we're not even going to open it up on the floor of the DNC. So, I mean, their party isn't even giving them the opportunity to let their voice be heard in that regard, which is awful, terrible thing. Parties absolutely should not deprive primary voters of the ability to vote for their preferred candidates in the primary. Here's the thing for, I guess, as a Republican.
It's an opportunity.
Well, we also can't, waste that opportunity.
Right.
It's one of those things that, yes, there are going to be disaffected Democrats that are upset and frustrated with their party. A good way to draw them in? Focus on issues that matter to all Americans.
Yep.
Let's say, for example, you're really frustrated with the health insurance system, the general American medical industrial complex, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Well, a great thing for Republicans to do would actually lead on that.
Yep.
Make it be an issue that all of a sudden these former Bernie voters are like, yeah, you know what? I disagree with you about these things. But man, no tips on tax, no tips on overtime, trying to bring jobs back to America, cutting taxes for everybody. Oh, and you're also going to do something about all this healthcare type of stuff. Like, that's where it starts to move the needle with people.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I mean, because the thing is it's not enough just to sit there and attack the Democrat Party and expect for people to switch parties if you don't give them a reason to come over onto your side.
The biggest, it's been projected, or it's been estimated, approximately 4 million voters when Bernie Sanders got his first in 2016, his primary stolen. There was approximately 4 million Bernie primary voters that ended up voting for Trump in 2016.
I believe it.
That was mainly through the Rust Belt, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio, of kind of the American first policy, bringing back the industrial base, et cetera, et cetera. The story. That kind of did start panning out a little bit in his first term. I think he's really, really going heavy on it this time, which is great. But needless to say, there's opportunity in crossing these lines that you don't necessarily have to play into the old dogma. And that's what's been so great about the last couple of years, the last decade that we've been living in, is that everything is being really flipped on its head, and it's happening so fast. Like, it doesn't and that's the thing that I'm kind of getting at, is like the caution. There's huge opportunity, but make no mistake about it, just like the Republican Party from 2014 is not the same Republican Party 2017.
No.
Or even 2016. That thing switched on its head. It brought in 4 to 8 million Democratic voters. The base kind of changed. The primary voter changed. It can happen very quick. So I know there's a lot of people out here laughing about AOC and Bernie Sanders going around on this tour and the private jets and yada, yada, yada. I was like, okay, but make no mistake about it. Their base is pissed off. They're active. They're alive. They're well. and they are starting to kind of rebound. They took their licks.
Right.
They're back in their corner. They're regrouping. And if we don't get some serious wins and don't just rely on our Lord and like, oh yes, like it's fate, we're destined to win now. Like and historically the president's first midterm, or a president's midterm is not good for them. So we have to buck the trend of historical statistics and overcome the fact that this base is very mad about things that matter to a lot of people. And if we're not going to take on the other things that matter to people, like healthcare or something, you're not going to really be able to convince them to stay home or maybe make an indifference vote or whatnot. They're just going to come out and vote against who's ever in power.
That's it. Yeah, I mean, because it's the old Reagan question: are you better off than you were X amount of years ago? And so for the Trump administration, and that's a really excellent point you made about the Bernie voters, because Trump didn't win over the Bernie voters by attacking the Democrats.
Right.
Trump won over the Bernie voters by solving problems for them, saying, "Hey, you're languishing. I want to take care of bringing back, you said, industrial stuff here to the U.S. I want to bring back those jobs." This is why so many union workers are pro-Trump, which is an amazing thing.
Totally flipped on its head.
Totally flipped it, right?
Yes.
And it's because he's offering solutions to problems that people care about. And I can't stress, and I don't know why every elected official at every level isn't seeing that and saying, here's Donald Trump, a deeply flawed man, somebody with character defects that historically would absolutely disqualify somebody from running for president.
Mm-hmm.
But because he's solving problems for people, and this another thing that I go back to, and I still think that people should heed it. Remember that, was it Oliver Anthony or Anthony Oliver? I can't remember who it was. That song that went viral for, a month, where he's talking about Richmond, north of Richmond.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That song was just some guy, not politically affiliated one way or the other, just screaming out, hey, we've got all these people going to Washington, all these Richmond, north of Richmond, that don't give a rip about us, that are more focused on their little ideological nonsense than they are actually solving our problems. And the fact that Trump has focused on solving those problems is what brought these new voters in.
Yeah.
So why in the world did we stop doing that? Like, why at any level would you stop doing that?
I think that, well, as far as the Bernie bros, they are, not going too deep on this, but the Bernie bros, Trump is in a really weird spot where, yes, he's ahead of the party, but the party is a kind of at like a neutral kind of civil war. Like it's kind of like the North Korean, South Korean thing. Like there was never a treaty, but we have a ceasefire between old arm Republicans of like right to work, no union voter, we want this, we want that, and this new coalition of, I guess, specifically with the Bernie bros of a very Midwestern Rust Belt. A lot of them, like you said, were prior union workers. A lot of those factories have been shipped off to Mexico, Canada, or overseas for numerous reasons. And so he's kind of playing this thing of like, hey, what do I got to do with, depending on what state we're in. So like right now we're seeing this with the budget. You have some Republicans, I like this, but I don't like this, and I can't vote for this because I'm in a blue state. So I can't. They have to play this line, and that's totally fine. But Speaker of the House needs to like really get it together, because really we do only have this one big beautiful bill at this point. These little bills getting through just is not going to happen. You just kind of have to like shovel everything in at once, like all into the burner. get a vote and get it through, and then that's it, which is wild to think that we're paying 435 people $178,000, and if they're Speaker of the House, they get more, to go there and do essentially pass one bill, like for the budget and the refinancing of the budget and everything like that. And it's just wild to think like that's what we've come to now, where it's like, all right, everyone get in what you want to make you just happy enough that you'll vote on it.
Right.
You know, that's bad.
It is bad. I mean, and again, I'm very opposed to omnibus bills. Omnibus spending bills, not a fan of it. Break it down, fund things more, per line basis than just this type of thing.
Yeah, love the idea. I really do. Like break this thing down in like 12 different bills.
Right.
Once a month. But unfortunately, like I really don't see this. I just really don't see it ever happening. I just think we just kind of keep going and going until it's just completely undone.
Well, it's a matter of so with a budget,
not to be too negative.
not to go too in the weeds on this. In the federal budget, there are certain things that we have to pay for.
Right.
Right. So those are the easy things. You do have one big budget for all of your mandatory spending. Pass it, you're good. Where you break it down is in all your discretionary spending. Like that's where you should have more of a breakdown on stuff than what we do. And the reason is that people, it's one of those things that if I scratch your back and you scratch mine, hey, if we all throw it together and it's all in the bill, I can go back to my constituents and say, yeah, I didn't like having to vote in favor of X, but I got you Y.
Yep.
Versus if it was all broke down individually, you wouldn't have that. You wouldn't be able to do that. You would just have to own the fact that you voted in favor of something that people didn't like. So it just, again, comes down to the incentives. But one of the things I wanted to go back to that you were talking about, there will always be civil war within political parties.
Always.
Like,
yeah.
I don't know why anybody ever believes that would ever stop being the case. We just have too much diversity of thought in this country for you to have two political parties and people to jump into one or two camps. Like you're always going to have some weird coalition that you have to form of voters in order for you to get above 50% to win elections. And so that's fine. It's like you talked about the difference between, we'll just call them, they used to be like the country club Republicans or the Chamber of Commerce Republicans versus, Trump's more blue collar populist group of Republicans.
Mm-hmm.
The core thing is we need to create American jobs. Because if you're somebody that's in the Rust Belt and your factory leaves town, that's bad, but you're not going to be that upset about it if there's another job that's created that's going to be as good or better that you're going to be able to do.
Yeah, that you're going to be able to do.
And so that's always the give and take on the Republican side, right?
Yeah.
Is it's a matter of, well, how much creative destruction do we allow? How often do we allow industries to get or companies, whatever, to get totally changed and create something new and have the gap to get people up to the new thing? It's the whole like learn to code type of stuff that the Democrats used to put out there and do that sort of thing. But like, yeah, for Republicans, I remember, in the 2000s and before Trump, there were always these Republican bills that were talking about how do we retrain and redevelop displaced workforces.
Right.
If we have these people that lost their manufacturing jobs, what do we need to do to be able to get them developed and trained and on to the next best thing? But at the core, the whole idea is that we need to create good American jobs.
Yes, absolutely. Didn't the learn to code thing come back to bite them in the ass so bad?
It did, because it became a Twitter thing.
Yes.
Where Twitter started censoring people for saying learn to code as though it was hate speech.
Yeah, so like so it's a brilliant thing, and the right has been really good about this. Like, oh, we're shutting down a coal mines, and then it was like people on the West Coast or the East. Oh, just learn to code, and it's like that didn't get much traction, but the opposite. So people grabbed on. They're like, oh yeah. As soon as those people started getting laid off, or H-1B visa workers started taking their jobs, or started getting shipped overseas or whatever, it's like, oh, well, just learn to code. And you can apply that to anybody that loses their job. I have this argument or conversation, I'll say, with people all the time about jobs being replaced really quick. So the latest thing in Texas was like there's going to be self-driving semi-trucks in the state of Texas.
Right.
Okay, cool. And people will bring up the argument of like, oh, well, would you shut down the internet so libraries don't go out of business? And it's like, that is a terrible, terrible comparison. The amount of librarians that got laid off compared to the amount of truckers that would possibly be laid off, in a very short amount of time. There's as far as the government goes, there is a responsibility to create an environment that is for workers to have jobs. We live in a very interesting time where jobs can turn over very, very quickly like that.
Okay, so here's my foray into that.
Okay.
The federal government is not the one responsible for those sort of issues. If you want to talk about having jobs that could come in and you can replace, that is a local government issue, in my opinion. How you develop your town. If you, as the city council of a town, are putting your entire economic bundle into this one big employer, that's poor city management. Right? I mean, that's one of those things that, like, you can't, as a federal government, the federal government should not be responsible for making sure that there are diverse employment opportunities at the local levels. And this is the thing that bothers me when you have these Midwest towns that were all built around
One factory.
Yeah. It's like, well, that's a terrible, terrible way to run your town, because you literally are putting that's bad city planning. You need to be able to sit there and say, okay, well, what do we need to build around this? And what you would normally find is you'd have a bunch of people on that city council that were all pushed by that local employer.
That's the way this country developed. But for instance, like, just like to go back to the truck thing, that's not a one local city thing. That's not like a Temple, Texas thing or Corsicana thing. Like that's going to across, trucks running from Houston to Dallas to Austin, and eventually you could go across the nation. You're talking about hundreds of thousands of truckers being laid off. I think there is a responsibility, and of course it depends on your ideology, right? But I do think that there is a responsibility for the federal government to make sure that, okay, we're implementing new technology, which I do agree that, like, if these truckers have other opportunities, or other opportunities are there that they can go do, if it's safe, it does make sense to do the, self-driving trucks just running hot shot on the highway. If if the technology is proven and it's safe, yada, yada, yada. But just to lay off a bunch of people to increase the earnings per share on the trucking companies, capitalists, pure capitalists will say, oh, well, that will drive competition and prices will come down and, yada, yada, yada. And my biggest pushback is, okay, but again, you're talking about a lot of people being laid off. What are they going to go do? There is a responsibility, and that's why we kind of have a safety net, but there is a responsibility. It's like, if those people don't have anything to do, you're talking about our fellow Americans not having anything, not having a purpose in life.
But I think you just nailed it. We already have that. It's unemployment.
Yeah, but
I mean, we already have
27 weeks.
Net. Yeah, we have a safety net.
We have a safety net, but
right. And I don't think that the government should be able to tell the business how to run their business like that.
Well,
If I'm a shipping company and I can,
that would be every regulation. That would be totally negate all of Trump, everything that he's doing with tariff and foreign investment and bringing it back. If they don't have a place, then he shouldn't even be doing it. He won because he has a mandate to do it.
no. So that's where you have a disagreement about Trump's tariffs, right? Other than a couple of people within the administration, the reason he's doing the tariffs is because we have out of whack trade agreements.
Right.
So we're fixing our trade agreements so we have fair trade agreements, but it's not meant to be some sort of protectionist type of thing. If there's like two people in his administration that are trying to claim that it's a we're bringing jobs back. Most of his administration is saying no, we're getting fair trade deals so we can actually have fair trade agreements with other countries.
And why would we want
the government? I think there's a big difference between the federal government regulating trade policy, which is a constitutionally granted power, and the federal government saying to businesses, you are not allowed to modernize your business because it's going to cause unemployment for people. I don't think the government has, I think that's a constitutional violation. I don't think the government has any right to regulate business in that way.
Well, was it a constitutional violation when Trump went to Indiana and went to Carrier Air and said, you're not going to move your factory to Mexico? Because that would be them modernizing, would be to move to Mexico and have cheaper labor and have a brand new facility made in Mexico where it's technically under, the capitalist idea of is more efficient, is cheaper. It makes the product cheaper and you could ship it back. That is essentially what his whole, that's what the voters turned out for.
Right. But the thing is if Trump were to use the law to prevent them from doing that, yes, it probably would be unconstitutional. But Trump didn't do that. What Trump did is Trump used the power of his office to advocate for that. And that's what Carrier did.
And so tariffs aren't considered like a law. They're considered a...
Well, but the federal government has a constitutional authority to regulate trade.
Yeah.
So that absolutely, tariffs, trade agreements, all that sort of stuff, they have a constitutional assigned authority to do that. But what you're talking about as far as implementing some sort of law that would prevent companies from modernizing their fleet to having self-driving trucks to protect trucker jobs, I don't know where that is. I don't know where they would have the authority to do that in the Constitution. That would be a super broad reading of the Commerce Clause, which I think generally Republicans would oppose if Democrats tried to do something similar to that. I mean, again, not all solutions to our problems are the government.
No, definitely not.
So, I think right now, look, we have to look at the world and say, okay, there's a very real chance that in the future you are going to have companies that are going to move towards automated transportation.
Yes, and we're seeing that. Right. Yeah, we're seeing that.
Just like we moved from trains to airplanes, and we've done all that sort of stuff. Like right. That's part of the economic growth. I don't think that you're going to be in a situation where all transportation immediately is going to flip over to be self-driving. I think you're going to have, just like anything else, you're going to have it slowly winnow its way through.
Yeah.
This is where, again, in my opinion, you look at local governments, I do think you do have certain places that are transportation type centers where you would need to say, we need to try to see if this happens and we lose all these jobs. We have, we're a port city and all of a sudden we're going to be losing all of our transportation stuff to self-driving vehicles.
Yep.
What do we need to do to make up for that?
Perfect example. So the longshoremen, if everyone remembers, we had that strike for like 4 days or whatever it was. One of their biggest things was they don't want automation in the ports.
Right.
Because some of the ports are starting to become almost completely automated. Like there's no one operating the crane, the intermediate shuttle that they put them on to take them either over to the rail or have it hooked up to an 18-wheeler, right? There's like no one there. It's like a ghost town. So in the past, we've had these innovations and people have pushed back against them, but generally speaking, they've employed more people, like from trains to airplanes, right? They've ultimately employed more people, and the response has almost been immediate. You could see where that's going to actually employ more people. I think we've reached this point now where it's like, okay, how do we remove humans from this equation? And I think so for the longshoremen, they say, well, look, you have this port, and yes, it is definitely more efficient. It is definitely, as far as a spreadsheet goes, as far as earnings per share goes, but we're now losing out on our jobs, right? And so it's like, okay, great. The stockholders are very happy about that. But as far as actual people goes, and like our fellow countrymen, I don't like that future. I don't think that has a future. And I also don't think that is a politically savvy thing to do, is be like, not stand with the longshoremen, not stand with union workers on, I mean, whether it's AI replacing this or automation or the job simply being shipped overseas, it's the same outcome of, okay, now what are we going to do? Are we going to learn to code? Is everyone going to be a coder? I mean, the simple fact is you're going to have a society of how many ever hundreds of millions of people are in America at any given time. There is going to be a very large percentage who just simply are not going to be mentally suited to be lawyers. Not everyone can be a lawyer. Not everyone can be a doctor. Not everyone can, be a dentist or how, whatever the top jobs are. That's just simply not true, or not going to be able to happen. Some people, a lot of people, and they don't want to get a side gig, and they don't want to be an entrepreneur. They want to go to work, be assigned a task, get paid a living wage, go home, have a family, go to church on Sunday, watch sports, and just keep doing the thing. And I think that's completely reasonable for us to try to work towards building an environment in which that could take place.
But I think we have that environment. But a lot of what you're talking about is going to require personal accountability of people. Because like I understand, I think you're short selling considerably the societal benefits of increased efficiency within our economy, right? I mean, you're making it just about shareholder value, but it's about more than shareholder value. Like, it positively influences lots of people that have more efficient goods and services. If you're able to make it less expensive to transport things, then that is good for the customer. That's
Right.
good. That's the sort of stuff that keeps inflation down, that lets us have prices remain lower. It's like, yeah, if you go back to, the old subsistence farming, I'm sure there was a lot of people that didn't want to stop being farmers.
Right.
But this goes back to my thing is like, it's not a matter of us as a society restraining our progress when it comes to stuff like that, like technological advancements. It's not about restraining those things or restraining the implementation of those things. It's about, how do we build a world where these people that are going to be negatively affected by it are able to continue to flourish.
Right. Yeah. No, that's exactly what I'm saying. There's a balance to it.
But the thing is that top-down government control of industry to stop that stuff has never worked. Like, that's the stuff that we vehemently oppose as Americans, because that's the sort of authoritarian, regime that creates all sort of other negative externalities, as opposed to, okay, I'm a port city. I have a bunch of longshoremen that live here.
Mm-hmm.
I can see the writing on the wall that there's going to be increased automation how do I need to affect my city's growth so that there are jobs for these people if they lose their longshoreman position, or do that as a state. This is why sometimes it is good for the federal government to be devoting money to research and development. How do we create new things? We talk about like nuclear power. Like, how many new jobs, great jobs, could be created if all of a sudden we need to start building more nuclear power plants?
There'll be tons.
Infrastructure in Texas. How many new jobs, great jobs, would there be if we start devoting money to fixing all the broken infrastructure that we have for water, for roads, for all this stuff?
Yeah.
Like, the stuff is there. The free market is still the best way to get the resources where they need to be. I mean, I completely understand, but this is where I go back to the solution isn't restraint. The solution is growth.
The solution's always growth, but like a completely unrestrained free market, like I used to be there mentally and politically, I just don't agree with it. Like that's why I stopped being a libertarian. I just don't believe, like I do believe in fairly well-rounded regulation.
Right.
And there is a throttle. I mean, because if again, I mean, we're both agreeing with each other, but you know, if you bring this thing to the absolute end of it, it's like at some point everything is going to be either made by machine or made in the third world because it's the cheapest, most efficient way to make things. And I agree. More people have more shoes now because we make them overseas and they're done, you know, in a press and all these things. Like I get that. But to what end? Right? Like what do all these things, like what does unemployment lead to? Like mentally and physically, you know, psychologically, like what do all these things when people are like don't have like lifelong careers and expectations and hope and you know, for instance, I mean the property ownership in this country is just continuing to decline and decline. If you look back through history, it becomes a very dangerous situation when you have a certain percentage of the population who essentially is not. When I look at property ownership, I think they're buying into the idea of the current system. If you don't have people that are bought in, it's like it's not just about the political class. It's a very dangerous situation for them, but it's also a dangerous situation for everyone that actually does own something.
Right.
Right, because they're going to be like one of the first, one of the kind of the first victims, I guess. If you wanted to play it, you can, you know, go look at what the Bolsheviks did, kind of, right? Like they had no buy-in on anything. Like we're never going to own anything. I think more and more people are feeling that, at least from, you know, kind of my generation and down. They're just kind of like the thought of like owning a home is just so far away. They don't even care about it anymore. Like that's just not an idea to them.
I agree. I don't think that the free market is the cause of those problems. I think the cause of those problems is the government.
Mm.
You know, like going back to like the financial crisis of 2008.
Yeah. They didn't let people fail. Well, it
wasn't just that. It was the whole reason that we originally got into the mess is because we had Fannie and Freddie buying up loans on the market.
Yeah.
It's the matter of, no, well, hold on a second. If we actually had to, because I was in the lending industry at the time. If you actually did have to qualify people for what we called prime mortgages, which is just you qualify for a mortgage, it is financially responsible
with actual documents,
money, right, with actual documents, actual underwriting.
No doc loan. Perfect.
We didn't have a problem with that.
Nope.
What we had a problem with is, well, hey, we can make all of these garbage loans, and Fannie and Freddie will buy them all up because Bill Clinton said that home ownership should be a right to all Americans.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden the government steps in because they want to give people the ability to buy homes. But instead of actually addressing a root problem, they just create these institutions that buy up a bunch of garbage loans.
Mm-hmm.
And then that ruined the market. Like that's a real underlying problem that blew up that sort of stuff. You look at now, the amount of over-regulation in the lending market with the CFPB and all the stuff that was created. I mean, I used to be an in-house counsel for a bank, and part of the thing that bank did was it stopped lending. It stopped lending. It stopped the mortgage business that it had because there was the cost of regulation was so intense, the cost of compliance was so intense that it just was no longer worthwhile for that bank to do. And so with a lot of the stuff like that, like that's my problem is a lot of these big issues that we have. If you look back at the murder scene, the fingerprints on the weapon are the government.
Yeah.
Coming in and trying to step in and play a role and stuff.
It's like a wholesome idea and then the implementation is terrible, and then you have bad actors that kind of take advantage of the situation,
Absolutely.
whether knowing or unbeknownst to them. There's a mixture of all that.
CFPB is a great example, right? What you had with the CFPB when it was created was originally supposed to be for the too big to fail banks, right? These gigantic banks were going to be the only ones regulated by the CFPB.
Yep.
But they knew what they were doing. They filled the CFPB full of these big bank types of people, and they developed the same. Their regulations were basically developed in a way that crushed community banks.
Yeah.
Because now all of a sudden the regulatory scheme that community banks had was elevated to what the big banks had to do.
Yep.
And the reason the big banks did that is because if you're at Bank of America or Chase, your rival, your threat is not the other big banks. It's the community banks in a certain region.
Right.
And so you can just, hey, we can crush them
with overhead.
We can crush them with overhead, no problem.
Yeah.
It's just, it's the same reason that, companies like Walmart were in favor of Obamacare. Hey, yeah, let's put these, like, all these insurance requirement standards. This will absolutely choke out a lot of our competition that can't afford to do that.
Yep.
And so this is, again, like, for me, I agree with you. We need laws to make sure that unsafe things aren't put in our food. We need regulations to make sure that doors don't fly off of airplanes when they're going through the sky. Like, there's definitely the place for fair regulations within society to protect the public. But the more that the government meddles, the more concerned that I get.
Absolutely. Let's jump over this story because we're talking about regulations. And some things that need to get done.
Are we doing Kyle's current events?
We'll do. I mean, yeah, we've kind of been on Kyle's current events a little bit. One of them is the promises, right? Kind of back to what we were talking about. Like, hey, we're already talking about the midterms. Like, as far as political campaigning goes, who's running, all these things. Like, yes, that's going to build over the months. But what really has to happen for the Republican Party, whether they're running or they're retiring or whatever, you need to come up with some wins, right? And so one of obviously Trump's big promises was no tax on tips, okay? And so this is one of those headlines that are kind of it's unclear, right, when it first comes out. Senate unanimously approves bill to eliminate tax on tips.
Right.
Okay, cool. So this is actually a bipartisan bill. Jackie Rosen from Nevada, Democrat, and Ted Cruz, our own Ted Cruz from Texas, have put this thing together, right? And it passed unanimously. Okay. So just because it has now, and here's the thing, I already saw it on Instagram. Oh, they, passed it. Everyone's liking it. Everyone's sharing it. Victory, whatever. But it's like, dude, that doesn't mean that it's actually a law now.
Right.
Like, it still has to go back to the House.
That's it.
And if the House, and you'll be able to explain this better, but it's like, if that exact bill doesn't go to the House, they have to come up with their own bill, vote on that, then they go into mediation, then that bill has to go to the president to sign.
Right.
So this thing, although it is a good sign that obviously neither part, it's really, I mean, maybe they both agree on it, but really just neither of them want to put their hands on, we don't agree with no tax on tips, right? Because it's a very heavy, that is a direct effect on a voting base. Servers and people that tip don't really want the idea of like, I'm going to tip this person, now they got to pay taxes on it, right? And this is just one of the things that kind of annoy me on like day to day when I'm scrolling. I'm like, that's not true. And there's like from people that are sharing this is like people that just share this and they're not in the know. I get it, right? But if you have a big following or if you are in the know and you're sharing this, you're kind of lying to your base. You're kind of misleading them. Right. Oh, you're definitely misleading them. I don't know if you're lying, but you're misleading them to the point where you think like, if the headline is Trump's big win or promises made, promises kept, and then bill approved for eliminate tax on tips, I think that's incredibly dishonest.
I 100% agree. This goes back to something that Jordan Peterson said recently, that the biggest threat to the Republican surge, whatever you want to call it, are the grifters.
Yes.
The grifters are the absolute biggest threat the Republicans have because they take wins and they delegitimize them.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great headline that the Senate's passed it and we're moving along in the process. But those people you follow on Instagram, and I follow some of them too, they don't give a rip about that. What they care about is how many views do they have on this post?
Right.
How many eyes, how many clicks, how many likes, how many shares, all that sort of stuff. They don't give a rip about whether or not they're actually conveying accurate information. That's why they're grifters.
Yes.
And I'm going to give you another example. The recent Supreme Court decision on the Trump using the Alien Act to deport people.
Yeah.
I have seen so many people that have been completely false reporting. And I mean this from Republicans in office, from Republican parties, we'll hypothetically say county parties, that are saying that the Supreme Court, ruled against Trump and voted this down and it's a threat to America and all this sort of stuff. What the Supreme Court said is that they're not ruling on the merits of whether or not Trump can use the Alien Expedition Act to deport people. What the Supreme Court said is that the Fifth Circuit had jurisdiction to rule on whether a temporary restraining order was wrongfully denied at the trial court level.
Mm-hmm.
And if you lost what I was saying, that's totally fine. Up until my second year practicing law, I probably also would have had my eyes roll back in my head and forget about it. But the way this worked is there was a lawsuit that was filed actually here in North Texas, the Northern District of Texas Federal Court. The judge was out, Judge Hendricks out in Lubbock, and the lawsuit said, "Hey, we're about to be deported. We think that this is wrong. He can't use this to do this." The lawyers in that case representing the aliens, I think, were ridiculous in their demands of the federal judge. They basically said, if you don't rule in like an hour, we're going to appeal your decision, which was ridiculous. Like you can't file something and have a federal judge rule on it without even hearing the other side. And the federal judge is like, I'm ordering the government to respond by midnight. I will rule thereafter. These guys didn't even wait till midnight on the day that they filed this stuff and appealed it up to the Fifth Circuit. The Fifth Circuit, the appellate court, said, hey, we don't think that we have the judicial authority to rule on this because, the trial court actually never even ruled on it. Since the trial court never ruled, we don't have jurisdiction. It gets appealed up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ultimately says, yeah, Fifth Circuit, you do have the ability to decide this. Not only that, we want you, the Fifth Circuit, to also rule on the merits of whether or not they're likely to succeed in their challenge that Trump can't use this, Alien Act to deport people. That's not as sexy of a headline.
It's not. No.
That's
Incredibly
not as
boring.
enticing of a call to action that the Supreme Court just stopped Trump from deporting and we've got to fight. It's like, be honest with people, though, because the problem is that we talk about a lack of trust that we have in our institutions. Well, one of the things that absolutely destroys our faith in our institutions is when you have people that deceive you about what that institution did. So if you have somebody telling you that the Supreme Court ruled that Trump was not allowed to deport because of X, Y, and Z, that person was dishonest with you. What the court said is, we are going to delay Trump deporting anybody. We are going to temporarily stop this from happening until we decide whether or not he has the authority under this Alien Act to deport people. They didn't say he was wrong for doing it. They didn't say he was permanently blocked from doing it. They said, hey, we're going to take a pause, keep these people in jail. We're going to decide whether or not you can do this, which I think is actually what the judicial system is supposed to do.
Right. Be level-headed and take time to consider it. to consider things.
And again, these are people that are already in jail, so it's not like they're out on the street. But the point is, and I think this goes back to what you talked about with people missharing the headline about the no tax on tips. You've got political commentators that have gigantic followings, and they're misleading you. Then you really need to ask yourself, is that a good source of information, or is that just some grifter that is trying to inflame your emotions so that you will follow, post, reshare, and like?
Yes. I think that's an amazing headway to talk about how someone that is dear to our hearts, Jeffrey Epstein, dear to our hearts, how he didn't kill himself all of a sudden. How long have people been saying that Jeffrey Epstein killed himself or didn't kill himself? Probably since 2 minutes after we found out that he killed himself.
Correct. When the most obvious fake suicide, maybe I honestly can't think of a more obvious, this guy's going to get killed and they're going to make it look like a suicide death.
Mm-hmm. Before it even happened, people
Ever?
were saying it. Yes.
Like literally ever.
It was, I mean, I remember people joking about it before it even happened. Like, oh, something's going to happen to him. Hillary Clinton's going to come visit him.
Right.
All these things. And it's like, we had 2 days ago now, Dan Bongino and Kash Patel, two people that I've respected and I've followed, I've liked. I probably actually followed Patel more than Bongino, which most people are the other way around. But they have both been saying this entire time that they believe that Epstein has killed himself, didn't kill himself. That it was clearly a hit. This is a huge blackmail extortion ring between whoever. But Epstein is obviously the front man for this, and he was killed in a jail cell by someone we don't know, by some group of people. And it's like perfect. The camera stopped working for some mysterious reason. The two guards that were watching him both decided to take smoke breaks at the same time. No one else was around. Like everything. It was just like the perfect whack, right? Like just boom, he's dead. He decided to kill himself during all these things. Okay, so Trump wins. The entire time we're going to find out the Epstein files, who was in there, who was trafficking in humans. We have people, he's in jail for trafficking people, but there's no one that he was trafficking to. We don't know. Trump puts Dan Bongino and Kash Patel into office, which is great. They get confirmed. And then they come out now and say, you know what? I've reviewed the files and I don't think there's any there. And you know what? In fact, you tell me why you think I'm lying. I mean, it's total reverse psychology, toxic relationship 101. No. The onus is not on me. It's on you. You tell me why you think I'm doing this.
Right.
And so now you're backpedaling. You're on the wrong foot. If you're not used to arguing with someone or being in a debate, you immediately take this step back and you say, oh, well, because I think, like, no. Stop them. No, you tell me why I should believe your ridiculous statement.
You've reviewed the file. Show me the file.
Show me the file. This is Missouri now. This is the show me state.
Well, I mean, I think it gets, and look, some of this stuff is basic deposition stuff, cross-examination stuff that I would do.
Right.
If I have somebody like that, and so the comp I would make to this is like experts in the law cases. Experts get to review all these files, all these documents to reach these opinions. Mm-hmm. So here, Kash Patel, Don Bongino, is it Bongino?
Yeah,
Bongino. His name right.
Yeah, Dan Bongino.
They're now the experts.
Right.
They're offering their expert opinion that he actually did kill himself.
Yes.
Right. They reviewed documents. In a lawsuit, I would get to ask the experts to produce all the documents they reviewed so we can see what the basis of this opinion is. Because, and again, I think that's the burden that Kash Patel and Don Bongino should be under. Hey, you're going to flip script like this so hard, you need to show me whatever it is that you reviewed. You need to disclose to the American people whatever it is that you reviewed to make you change your mind. Because I think what it probably was is they opened a manila folder and it had a piece of paper, and in blood it was written, you know, you'll be next, drop it, or something like that, you know?
Right.
Because look, the people that are alleged to be involved with Jeffrey Epstein are definitely the level of people that could off the director of the FBI if they so desired.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's a matter of, look, and this is when you said that I don't follow either one of them as closely as you do. When you said that Bongino was like, what reason would I have to change my mind and reach this opinion? It's like, well, they threatened you. I think that's a pretty easy,
Right.
pretty easy motivation. You got threatened or you got bought off. I mean,
Yep. You got threatened. Your family got threatened. Or maybe it's not like so violent. Maybe, there's tons of things going. And by the way, I'm just right off the bat, like I'm fairly proud of the reaction from the base right off the bat. They're like, no, dude, no. Like they weren't, because if we were in the Democratic Party, we would have to say kind of like what they did with Joe Biden. No, he's totally fine.
Yeah.
If we were in the Democratic Party right now, we would have to say, it does look like he killed himself.
Yeah, you know what? Dan's right.
Dan's right.
Cash and Dan are right.
Don't question it. Let's just keep on moving. And it's like, that's the one thing. But, the next thing is that, you haven't shown us any evidence, but I think it kind of goes to show like how bad this entire Epstein blackmail extortion ring is and how deep it runs. I think it runs so deep that it's on both sides. Anyone that has anything is involved somehow, or they know someone that's involved and they don't want to burn each other. And it's a really sick thing. But what is even more sick is that like this right here could all be, I mean, I guess, in the Navy, we have these things they're called Navy e-learning, right? And then they're required trainings, like 12 trainings a year. One of them is trafficking in humans. It goes through this like 30-minute kind of interactive PowerPoint of like, obviously, trafficking human is bad. And these people are, slaves and, you're extorting. But other than that, it's like, they show cases where military members have been extorted for now they're committing a legal act. They're caught on camera doing this. And it's like you're an E1 and you know this right off the rip.
Right.
Like you're exposing yourself to a serious situation to be extorted by doing something like this. And it's like we have the leaders of the free world, I guess if you want to put it like that, being extorted so easily that all of them are doing it,
right?
To some extent. I have no other reason to believe than to just believe that at least the majority of them have been extorted, right? And it's on both sides. I really do believe like if this was like a Republican issue or if they had Donald Trump on there somewhere, that would have been released, right?
Yes.
I think that when they were in power, that would have at least happened, at least that one little section. But now that the tables are turned, it makes me think that like, okay, well, why don't you put it out if it's mostly Democrats on there? Like, sure, there might be one or two Republicans, but maybe you just take the hit but like, no, I think it just runs so deep that they're just like, you know what? Let's just try to move on. That's scary to me. It's hard.
I don't think, look, I 100% agree with your position. The fact that the Trump administration did a fake rollout of the Epstein list where they had the big publicity stunt and they tried to bring all of these influencer types in to roll this out to the Republican masses to pretend like something was happening to appease them.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then nothing of substance happened. And then you have Pam Bondi and Kash Patel both pointing fingers at the other one. Oh, well, he said, she said, well, he has the, well, no, you, and that whole
New York is holding the files.
Right. That whole like who's on first base act. Like,
yeah.
No, it's not hard. Like there's a case file. There's a Jeffrey Epstein case file that exists that has all this stuff in it. It's not hard to get a hold of that sucker and produce it. It just really isn't. This is something that happens all the time. How easy was it for them to produce all the stuff about Trump when they were investigating him for having classified documentation at Mar-a-Lago?
Right.
I mean, that stuff is there. Look at all this stuff that we have from Kennedy that we've been keeping since the 60s that we have to release.
Yes.
It's not hard to go find the Jeffrey Epstein case file and release that sucker. The fact that it hasn't been done, I think, means that, look, I think it's more than just Republican, Democrat. I mean, I think that you're probably going to have like captains of industry that are on there. You're going to have huge money people that are on there. You're going to have celebrities that are on there. You're going to have judges that are on there. You're going to have all sorts of things from all of the upper crust of the folks that run through DC and Boston and New York and all that stuff are going to be on those lists. And so, yeah, I honestly think if they release the Epstein files, the worldwide cataclysm that would cause politically is just, yeah, they sit there and know. And when I say they, I mean like Cash and look, Trump is in this too.
Right.
He's the boss. All these people answer to him.
And he's been silent.
When Cash Patel and Don Bongino reached this opinion that Jeffrey Epstein, actually offed himself, you think Trump doesn't know that they said that?
Yeah.
Where's the boss man, right? The boss man's responsibility at that point to come in is like, no. Release it. When there was the whole flubbed release between Bondi and Patel the first time,
yeah,
Trump should have walked right in there and been like, no.
He doesn't want to. He doesn't want to. I've a couple of like the best, I guess the lightest takes on it is like the Epstein file or the part about him, whether he killed himself or not is just, it's just so inconclusive. And if that's the case, then release it. Just release it. Or people like, oh, well, we don't want to release the file because then it's like, we're releasing the victims. Well, no, you can redact that, or the photos you can redact. And by the way, most of these, like the latest victim killed themselves as well.
Right.
The main lady that was out there talking, I can't remember her name, but like she's out here talking about how, blowing the lid off this thing, and now she's killed herself. I mean, it's like, how far do we have to go with this?
Yeah. I will have to say, I can understand her doing that because of I can only
pressure.
Imagine, well, number one, I can only imagine the mental scarring, the emotional scarring that she has from surviving all that.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, you have all of the other pressure that's on her. I mean, this is somebody that cannot live a normal life for the rest of her life. Right. Always having, can you imagine the paranoia of being the person that outs this whole thing and being the face of it?
It would be pretty bad.
I would look, I've had cases where I've been concerned, enough that I was mindful of the other party if they were waiting for me in the parking lot. And that's a very minor civil dispute. If you were her, I can only imagine the pressure that was on her all the time. But at the end of the day, again, this gets back to the fundamental part about the distrust that people have, and I think rightfully so. I think you now have both sides of the political aisle protecting the powerful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like who is it? If you're the American people, like who is it? Especially because if it was, Donald Trump seems like the exact guy that you would put your faith in to do something like this. Because he's allegedly an independent billionaire. I need nobody's money. I owe nothing to anybody, and I'm draining the swamp. I'm doing all this stuff. He's the exact kind of candidate that you would think would be the one to release this stuff.
Yes, I totally agree, and he's just been kind of MIA on it. Which tells me that there's something incredibly toxic in there. And they're just kind of hoping that it kind of goes away. I'm assuming this is the kind of heat people got about like the JFK assassination. What's another one that was like really big, and like, hey, we want to see it, and they're like, if you just don't talk about it, it will go away eventually. Yep. But it's like, really, I mean, JFK, people just keep talking about it, and then the conspiracies continue to grow.
Right.
And today it's even worse. The conspiracies they grow faster and they go longer than anything else.
I think, my actual opinion is I think the reason it doesn't get released by either side is because it is so detrimental to so many of our allies.
Yeah.
I think that you would find on that list, there are a lot of America's closest international allies that would have their nation absolutely shook to its core about the people that are on the Epstein list, that it's almost a matter of, international policy that it would not be in our best interest for our relationships with our allies to release that.
That is probably actually the biggest reason why it's not being released. That actually probably is because
think about we know about Prince Andrew.
Right.
That's easy.
Right.
If Prince Andrew's on there, like, some of the big wealthy families in Europe because half those European countries are run by the same handful of, or their royalty is all the same handful of people.
Their royalty is now the people with their money, their donors. People from the Middle East, could be people from China. It could go down the line, and that's why it probably is bigger than both parties. Just to be kind of like, if we're not going to release it, then I think that Trump should go full bore with it and actually extort people around the world for it, and let's start seeing some better trade deals. Like, if it's like, okay, if the truth's not going to come out, then let's start using this weapon, all right?
Well, so my biggest thing, so obviously the biggest thing about the Epstein thing is the horrible things he did to young girls.
Right, that's the worst.
Without, from a political standpoint, who is he operating on behalf of?
Right.
Why was he collecting all of this? What was the intended use for all of this? Because it wasn't just for himself.
No.
I don't believe that it was just some guy that was trying to extort people so he could make money.
Oh yeah, no.
Like,
because he was already rolling. He was already a billionaire.
He was operating on behalf of someone somewhere, of some intelligence group or something, right?
Sure.
And so for me, that's a national security problem. So you're sitting here telling me that this guy is operating in the U.S., this intelligence gathering extortion ring from some of the most powerful people in the world, with access to some of the most powerful and influential people in our country. Man, we need to get to the bottom of that. And I do think that the American people deserve to know that.
They do.
Because, were we doing it? Is this a CIA thing? Because you can sit there and ask all the questions in the world about who he might have been doing this on behalf of.
Right. I wouldn't be surprised if it was, or if it was like a joint venture. It was like kind of what the I-5, I think it's called, like the different intelligence agencies, American intelligence aren't necessarily allowed to spy on Americans, so they have the British spy on, right. And they kind of trade data, and that's kind of the workaround. Who knows? We could know, though. We could know a lot more.
Right.
But so listen, you never know when you're about to be extorted. You never know when you're about to be caught naked on camera. Nancy Mace, kind of breaking news, has shown videos from her ex-fiance or ex-husband, I think it's ex-fiance, took many, many photos and videos of her around the house.
Who?
Nancy Mace, Rep Nancy Mace.
Oh, okay.
She's the rep from South Carolina, but she's on the Senate floor showing videos. And this kind of comes on the heels of the new Take It Down Act that Trump put out, which that's a great one. Like that is a 99.1% issue, right?
Well, I will say, I'll give credit to Senator Cruz. Senator Cruz is
Yep.
pushed that a lot too.
Absolutely. And that's a bipartisan thing. Hey, you can no longer, post naked photos or videos of people that you're having relations with, or if they send you something to, back and forth, you can't just go post that on the internet anymore. It's a felony. And you also can't make AI generated photos
Right.
and post, because they've gotten very good at that too. The AI has gotten very good at, like, especially for women, if you submit 5 or 6 photos of them in different outfits, they can kind of gauge on what this person would look like naked.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's great. But if you are going to get caught naked on camera, you're definitely going to want to work out. So from Zero Hedge,
What a transition.
Working
Look,
out.
he's not doing an ad read. Honestly, dude, you sound like you're doing an ad read right now. You sound like you're about to tell people to go work out at Equinox or something like that.
I am about to tell them to work out. I'm telling them to work out because it makes you more right wing. Working out is right wing, and that's a good thing. So, according to recent articles, engaging in physical exercise is now linked to right wing extremism. Okay, that's why I like to go to the gym 4 times a week or more. The narrative suggests that lifting weights, building discipline, and taking responsibility for your own body are somehow dangerous acts. The Guardian claims that getting in shape could turn you into a right-wing jerk. I guess that's why I'm a jerk.
No,
good.
I think that's why you're right wing.
Oh, okay, yeah. It has its origins in white supremacy. According to MSNBC, during the pandemic, workout trends ended up leading to extreme ideologies. I'm guessing that's they'll probably later on in this article will connect that to Trump's victory. So just according to this, according to the left, don't work out, be way, way out of shape, sit on your couch, vape, eat all the different dyes, don't listen to RFK, and vote Democrat, because that's what they want you: dumb, weak, and broke. And then you have to rely on the government. You'll have no other choice.
I wish I thought it was that deep.
I don't think it's that deep.
I do think. I mean, look, I do. This goes back to a lot of things. I mean, I do think, yeah, if you're going to have that sort of discipline in your life, I can see that it would make you look at the world a little differently. Yeah. Right? I mean, if you're somebody that actively manages their health and is going to the gym and is working out, is in doing all those sort of things, I could definitely see why that would influence you to have more of a mindset of like, no, take personal responsibility for yourself. Make your own improvements. Don't rely on something else.
Well, remember when they said being on time was a white construct and it's racist?
I do.
That goes back to this. Like, you have to show up to the gym at a certain time. You have to leave at a certain time. Well, without the ability to defend yourself, you stop forming your own opinions. You become agreeable out of a survival instinct. Weakness breeds obedience. What's been labeled as toxic is now actually essential. Without strength, there is no freedom. And without testosterone, there is no original thought, just borrowed scripts and empty slogans. So what do you think?
I think that the underlying study is probably hot garbage, but it made for an interesting headline.
It definitely made. I mean, as I read this, I don't know if this is like there's a direct correlation, but there's something there. Like, there's something to being physically fit, being disciplined, being on time, that is going to lead you to being more right wing. I think there's something there. I mean, look at men on the left in general. This is all generalities, right? Mm-hmm. You can find really healthy and fit, like, left wing dudes. I'm not saying you can't. I'm just saying in general, men on the left, I mean, look at their talking heads. Like, look at David Hogg and those 4 other dudes that were kind of Instagram famous for a little bit, and then they got caught extorting women for naked photos. And they're kind of feminine. They're kind of thin. They kind of have higher voices. None of them really have any facial hair. Yeah, I can't really think of too many like super masculine left-wing figures.
Well, I mean, I think that depends on how you look at RFK. I mean, RFK was a Democrat until about 5 minutes ago.
Good point. And he's
I mean, he literally was
shredded.
trying to run for president as a Democrat.
Yep.
Um, but I think, look, I think you could say the same thing on the other side of the aisle. Donald Trump is not going to the gym 4 times a week.
Good point. Yeah, he's eating McDonald's.
I mean, I think if you think some of the more fit presidents that we've had have been, Obama was pretty fit. Clinton was a jogger, sort of a well-known jogger. I don't know.
Biden is extremely fit right now.
I think I think it probably is a hot garbage study that underlies it. I can definitely see where there would be on the surface a tie between, anything that requires discipline and personal responsibility to make you more Republican. But then the other part of it, I will say, is that, I mean, look, success in politics does take a pretty solid level of personal discipline.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to get to that level, to do all the stuff that you need to do, very few of them are able to just sort of like stumble into it. I don't know. I think that's more of a headline than I would really say it's something that I'm gonna.
I'm just gonna $20. It's absolute verifiable fact. It's practically a math. Math is never wrong. All right, different topic. Along with now, this is something we keep talking about military spending. It's up to $1 trillion now. There's a lot of waste. There's a lot of abuse, and then there's a little bit of fraud in there. This is something that I can really get behind, and I think this is really great for America. If this goes back to Ronald Reagan and Star Wars,
Yeah.
and how he had this vision of like, no one's even going to bother building missiles or nuclear warheads because our defense system is going to knock it out of the sky. We've seen defense systems work fairly well. Iron Dome comes to mind for Israel, and of course that's an adaptation from like our ships, and different countries have different systems. We equate it to Israel because they use it the most.
Right.
And they're talking like the amount of math and precision that goes into a mortar leaves one spot. It's the train leaves the station A and train leaves station B, but instead you have a mortar and a rocket, and how do I make them collide in midair? It's absolutely amazing. Donald Trump rolls out Golden Dome missile defense project and appoints a leader. Pete Hegseth in the background there of the Oval Office, Trump launching Golden Dome for America. The defense industrial complex could not be happier. However, I think in the long run, with this right here, this could save money with lowering military expenditures on, let's say, our triad system. The global nuclear defense system and launching system could just become obsolete. Like, we're not going to, neither side really wants to fire the first, right? And so if the other side can't even fire, or it's going to be obsolete, there would be no need to have our SSBNs or all the silos like out in Wyoming, and to store all the other, to store and maintain all the other missiles and nuclear warheads. The administration will move forward with developing a so-called Golden Dome missile defense system that he has envisioned will protect the United States from possible foreign strikes using ground and space-based weapons. I wish I could read it in a Dr. Evil voice, but I can't. Flanked by the U.S. Defense Secretary in the Oval Office, Trump also said that he wanted the project to be operational before he left office, and he added that Republicans had agreed to allocate $25 billion in initial funding. And Canada has expressed an interest in taking part. That would be awesome, because that kind of goes back to when this tariff thing all kicked off of like, hey man, like we're picking up all the slack for the defense of the Arctic and the Pacific and the Atlantic, and you use all of those waterways. I think this is great. I really like to see actually what this is going to end up being, and I'd also like to see it actually be used in other parts of the world, because I mean, it could be great. Let's say we sell that to Japan, or let's say we sell it to Israel, or we sell it to both Pakistan and India. That brings the level of risk down around the world greatly, not having a nuclear bomb possibly go off via missile. What are your thoughts?
I don't like the name.
It's so dumb.
I mean, I get that it's the Iron Dome, so it's the Golden Dome. I hate the name. Like, it needs to be the Screaming Eagle missile defense system or something cool.
Yeah.
Put that to the side.
Sure.
Yeah, it's one of those things, like, I honestly think that if you ask most Americans, they would assume that we had something like this already. Right? Like, given the Patriot system and given all of the other missile interception systems that we use around the world to protect other countries, I think most Americans probably think that we already have something like this in place.
Yeah.
I think it would be great. I don't know. I think this is, you get back to the Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner.
Yeah.
You know, like, there'll be a new Acme missile. You know, you have things like hypersonic missiles. I wonder how well a system like this would work against that, because it definitely seems like that's where China and Russia is at least pretending that that's where it's going, as far as moving away from ICBMs and moving more towards the hypersonic missile type of thing.
Yeah.
So that would be my first thought, is like, I honestly wonder just in general whether or not ICBMs are already largely obsolete. Because, I mean, we know from at least looking at a lot of stuff with Russia and China, like, they have ICBMs that are just fake so that they can claim that they have them, that they have no actual function.
Right.
And so we have all of them, respectively. Most of them are in working order. I certainly don't want to get rid of our submarines. I would hate to get rid of our nuclear submarine fleet with all the nukes that are on them.
Yeah.
I definitely want to be able to use a B-2 or whatever the modern version of the B-2 is to fire those suckers off and have that ready at all times. I just honestly, so this is, okay, I guess going back to it, here's my concern. I kind of wonder if this is a solution to a 50-year-old problem.
It very well could, because what is the actual risk of someone firing a nuke at us?
Right.
Like, what? And maybe you have like a rogue state, like let's say Iran, just hypothetically. If somehow they get it on a ship and they fire it from the ship, they got like one nuke. Obviously, that could be millions of people.
Right.
But, like, it's just one.
Right.
So, yeah, I think this probably is or this is what Reagan did, was he's like, yeah, we're going to have Star Wars. And so the Soviet Union at the time started spending more money,
right,
to try to, like, okay, how are we going to get past this now?
Yeah.
What are we going to do?
I mean, if it's something like that, that makes all the sense in the world. If your thought is we have to, because I look, a missile strike on the U.S., really, to me, China is the only country that we would need to worry about doing something like that. I guess
Right.
There's an offhand chance that Russia could get desperate and do something like that.
Sure.
Right. Because my biggest concern, and always has been, is that you're going to have one of these states like Iran or Pakistan or North Korea or somebody like that is just going to give a dirty bomb to somebody to set off in the U.S.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that to me is the biggest threat of a nuclear attack, is that there's a dirty bomb that's detonated in New York.
Not via missile. Like it's in the back of a semi truck.
Correct. Yeah. If it even needs to be that large. right? It's
Right.
it's in the back of a U-Haul.
Yep.
That's my biggest concern of a nuclear attack in the U.S. is something along those lines. I think it's cool. I definitely think that whether it's to stop nukes or not. I mean, I definitely think on the West Coast, it would probably be wise for us to have some missile defense capabilities.
Yes.
Because
Absolutely.
I think a lot of the war games that I've seen with China is one thing that they would do would be to detonate a high altitude nuke to send out an EMP to disrupt our systems.
Yep.
So something like that to prevent that from happening would be good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But we'll see. I mean, there's been so many. The problem that I have with this stuff is that one, like, okay, great. So, like, where are we going with? There's no timeline. There's no, he said, "Oh, I want to see it done before the." But that's just him saying that.
Right.
There's nothing holding that I've seen in contracts or anything like, hey, if you don't reach these goals, then like, you're gonna have to pay or it's gonna be worth less or anything
Right.
like that. It's just like, oh, you didn't make it. Well, here, let's give you some more money because you clearly are struggling with it. And then it's really just sad. Again, this is like another thing that kind of goes, not all promises are going to be met. So, like, for instance, cutting the budget, that's not going to happen. Even if Pete Hegseth comes up with the 6% over 5 years or 8% over 5 years, the first time a budget has come up, they've actually upped it 150 billion or whatever.
Right.
It's pushing almost $1 trillion. And it's like, is that there? And look, we're only 120 days. Trump is going to want more stuff for the military. So he can say, I have the biggest, best military in the world. This is just going to get more and more expensive. And I just fear that really contractors haven't learned a lesson and they just keep saying, great, yeah, we'll do that for you.
Right.
And they estimate that this would cost I think it was like 540 billion dollars over the next 2 decades. Final price tag, $540 billion over the next 2 decades.
I mean, that makes sense. It's a big country.
It's a big country.
Right. Like if you're legitimately trying to claim that you're going to build a golden dome over the U.S. in its entirety, like how much money is spent on Israel's Iron Dome and how big is Israel?
Yeah.
Now we're going to say we're going to do that for, I mean, I can only imagine how much it would cost just to do one of those for Texas.
It'd be very big.
Right.
Especially our location.
Yeah.
Especially our location. It'd be easier if you were Kansas or something. But, yeah,
I mean, I think, look, having some sort of missile defense system, I think is a good thing. I don't know if we need a $500 billion missile defense system. I think maybe having something that protects strategic points in the country is probably the best way to spend that. If we're going to go into space, man, we got to get ready to fight the aliens, right?
We got to get ready. Yeah.
I mean, Independence Day is going to happen eventually, and we're going to need to be ready when it does. We don't need to be relying on Jeff Goldblum to save us or something along those lines.
Yeah, no, definitely not.
Well, we've covered a pretty wide variety of topics tonight.
Mm-hmm.
You have any closing thoughts? Any way you want to put a bow on it?
Oh, I would just say that more disappointments are coming down the pipeline. So never put too much faith in any one person or party. But it's really just a collection of, hey, these are the things that are being offered. These are the things that they're performing on. It's impossible to get everything done. And so, like, as the months roll by, we need to stay engaged. We need to stay active. We really have a looming deadline here next November
Right.
of this midterm. And pretty much this past, 18 months or, 24 months since he's been elected could just go to waste. Everything can be undone. Everything could very well be undone. Think back to Obama and the Tea Party movement. It was the largest swing in history. That can easily happen again.
Right.
That could very easily happen again. And I'm not really, I know everyone's fatigued and everything, but I'm worried about how much energy is on one side, Democratic side, and how much energy is on our side, which is really low energy right now. That's why I'd leave everyone with.
Yeah. We're relying on the government to solve too many of our problems. I mean, there's a lot of the stuff that we talked about tonight are failures in government.
Yep.
The government failed to disclose the Epstein information that it had. I think that's pretty fair to say at this point. Oftentimes when the government tries to intervene in your day-to-day life, they fail, they mess it up, they muck it up.
Mm-hmm.
Going back to your Republicans or going to the gym, like if that's true, again, it comes down to personal responsibility and being able to take charge of your life. Don't rely on the government to make you healthy. You be healthy yourself. Don't wait. If you don't want to eat high fructose corn syrup, don't wait for the government to ban high fructose corn syrup. Just don't eat it.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to feed it to your kids. If you don't want to eat the dyes, you can already do all that stuff. And so this is a big thing that I have a growing issue with is we even as Republicans, we continue to rely on the government to do more and more and more and fix more and more of our problems instead of introspectively looking at just, hey, how could we just live a better life ourselves? And what effect would that have on society as a whole? What effect would that have in my immediate community? Because the more that we focus the government on doing the things that we actually need them to do, like lowering property taxes, like increasing teacher pay, doing those sort of, providing us with water. I mean, how many governmental programs in the state of Texas would you cut if it meant that you would be able to have clean water? Right?
Yeah.
And if we're sitting there and saying, hey, in the Texas budget, we've got this gigantic surplus, but we don't have the money to upgrade our water infrastructure, well, we probably are causing the government to fix too many other things and not just focus on the stuff that it needs to.
Mm.
That's my overarching take of the night. Other than, don't look a gift horse in the mouth when it comes to all the mistakes that the Democrats have made with Biden and with picking the wrong sides of all the different issues. You talk about the midterms, you talk about what Trump could do. Here's a difference, I think, between Trump and Obama. The thing that caused the Tea Party was, one, we had the bailouts of the banks.
Mm-hmm.
And two, we had the takeover of the healthcare system.
Right.
Those were two huge things that Democrats shoved down the American people's throat that the American people didn't want. And for whatever critiques you have of the Trump tariffs, there is nothing that the Trump administration has done that has been as large and transformative to big parts of the American economy than what they did to the financial markets and what they did to the healthcare system.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm less concerned about the midterms writ large. I think there'll be some movements on the side, but I do think that once you start to see inflation continue to fall, which is what it's been doing, and you see energy prices going down and you see the stock market going up and people are confident in those sort of things and the future of our economy, I'm optimistic on that front. So we'll see.
Awesome, guys. Please like, subscribe, and most importantly, share to your friends and family. And we will be back next week. Thank you.
Thank you.